This story is titled, My Wife Kept Bringing Up LAT Marriage Daily. When I agreed, she immediately regretted it, because the first person I fucked was her own sister. Hey everyone, I'm 38 years old, and until recently, I thought I was living the dream life. I've been married to Kate, who's 34, for almost 8 years now. We've been together for a total of 10 years and have 2 amazing daughters. One is 7 and the other is 5. I work in construction management, having started from the very bottom and worked my way up through pure determination and grind. Kate has some fancy corporate job in accounting. 3 years ago, we bought our house in the Houston suburbs. Our kids are doing great in their private school, and we even got a golden retriever last year. We were basically living that classic American dream life, or at least that's what I thought. Looking back now, I should have noticed the red flags. Kate started acting different lately, more cheerful and weirdly excited about work. She used to just complain about meetings and coworkers like normal people do, but suddenly everything at work was amazing and exciting. Then there was David, her new boss. At first, he was just another name in her work stories. You know, typical stuff like David had the best idea in the meeting, or David totally saved the project. Normal stuff, right? Wrong. She started mentioning him in these weird, casual ways. Like when we talked about management, she'd say, "You should hear David's take on leadership. It's actually really inspiring." Or when I made fun of corporate buzzwords, she jumped in defending them. David says those words actually matter for team building. Yeah, definitely her own opinion. One day I joked about it, saying, "Sounds like David's your work husband." She froze for a split second, then forced this awkward laugh and said, "Oh, stop. He's just a great mentor." I should have known something was up, but I was too busy being a good dad and husband, fixing things around the house, taking care of the kids, and living my normal life. Until that day when everything changed. I was sitting on the couch one evening, watching a YouTube video about fixing the garage door. I was half focused on the video, half thinking about weekend plans, when Kate walked in with this weird look on her face. I could tell she'd been practicing whatever she was about to say. I asked if everything was okay. "Are the kids good? Your parents?" She was shifting her weight like she couldn't stand still. Yeah, everyone's fine," she replied. She took this deep breath and said, "I just need to talk to you about something." I paused my video and gave her my full attention. That's when she dropped the bomb. "I think we should try living apart together." I was completely blindsided. Living what? "You know, still married but separate places," she explained. "Sharing custody, it's a thing people do." I just stared at her, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. I had to pause and rewind my brain, wondering if maybe I'd inhaled too many cleaning chemicals earlier. Everything had been completely normal that morning. We had breakfast together like usual. I helped get the kids ready for school, and we exchanged our normal goodbye kiss. There were no fights, no tension, nothing. This came out of absolutely nowhere. I asked her to explain this living apart thing and where she'd even heard about it. Turns out she'd been hanging with this new friend Olivia from her yoga class. Olivia was apparently some self-proclaimed modern relationships expert who'd been divorced 4 times, yet somehow thought this made her qualified to give marriage advice. What kind of backwards logic is that? I tried to stay calm, though. I put my phone down and attempted to have an actual adult conversation. I asked if I'd done something wrong, if there were problems I didn't know about, trying to be that mature husband who communicates. Her response made me want to scream. She was sitting there super casual, like she was talking about changing our internet provider. She said she needed space for personal growth and started throwing around all these buzzwords. It sounded like she'd swallowed a self-help book. She kept talking about how LAT relationships are the future of marriage, and apparently all these European couples were doing it. Because what works in Stockholm should definitely work in Houston, right? The audacity of this woman. She said we could always go back to living together if it doesn't work out, like our marriage was some Netflix free trial, not our actual family with 2 young kids. I sat there thinking about our daughters. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that mommy and daddy are still married but don't want to live together anymore? Make it make sense. Kate was never like this before. She always shut down talks about open marriages, even as jokes. She'd said it was too complicated, not her thing. Now suddenly she's all about modern arrangements. Something was definitely not adding up here, and I was determined to figure out what it was. I spent half the night Googling everything about LAT relationships, stress eating the kids' leftover Halloween candy while researching. I actually found out some interesting stuff. Some people do make this LAT thing work, but it's usually older couples with grown kids or people working in different cities. Not couples with young kids in elementary school living in the same suburb. Red flag number 427 right there. I decided to play along, though. You know that saying about giving someone enough rope? That's exactly what I was thinking. The next morning, I sat down with Kate. I had my laptop ready with Google open, like this was some business meeting. I started talking about formal custody arrangements, and her face when I mentioned this was priceless. Pretty sure she thought this would be super casual, some you do your thing, I do mine arrangement. So we need to figure out proper custody schedule, I said. Thinking week on, week off, or maybe 2-2-3 split. Also need clear rules about holidays and birthdays. Her face when I said we should get lawyers involved to make everything official was a picture. Lawyers? I thought we could just figure it out as we go, she replied, clearly thrown off. That's when I dropped my first bomb. I told her my cousin Megan is actually a family lawyer and had offered to represent me for free if needed. That random drunk conversation at last Christmas party was suddenly coming in clutch. Kate immediately started talking about some lawyer she knew through Olivia, who apparently handled all of Olivia's divorces. Yes, all 4 of them. Big surprise there. I started asking very specific questions about her plan. Who's paying for the second apartment? How are we splitting bills? What about kids' school transportation? Who gets the dog on which days? How do we handle medical emergencies? What about parent-teacher conferences? Who's responsible for extracurriculars? I watched her get more uncomfortable with each question. This wasn't how Olivia told her it would go, I could tell. I pulled out this spreadsheet I'd made at 3 a.m. that broke down exactly how much everything would cost. 2 households instead of 1. Rent, utilities, groceries, insurance, the whole 9 yards. I even included a column for dating expenses, because hey, if we're living apart, might as well be realistic. I could literally see the moment it hit her. This wasn't going to be some fun independent woman adventure, like in those movies Olivia probably made her watch. This was real life with real consequences. Then I asked the million-dollar question. So which neighborhood are you thinking of moving to? The way she hesitated set off all kinds of alarm bells in my head. She tried to act casual, saying she'd been looking at Pine Ridge apartments. For those not familiar, Pine Ridge is this fancy complex on the other side of town. Way more expensive than what we'd budgeted in my spreadsheet. I ended the conversation there, telling her we'd continue planning later. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but something felt really off. Why that specific place? It's a 30-minute drive from the kids' school, has no playground, and the units are mostly 1-bedrooms. Not exactly ideal for someone planning to have 2 kids stay over. I decided it was time to do some digging. One of my work buddies, Marcus, has a sister working at the Pine Ridge leasing office. I shot him a text asking for some intel. Yeah, it was kind of sketchy, but desperate times, right? Guess who lives at Pine Ridge? Someone from Kate's office. The new regional manager she'd mentioned hundreds of times. He's just really passionate about corporate synergy himself. David. I thought maybe she was just jealous of him living there and wanted to try out the fancy life. But something still felt off. When I brought up setting up kids' rooms in her new place, Kate got super weird about it. She started saying stuff like, maybe we should wait until I'm settled in. And the girls might be confused at first. Then she dropped this gem. Maybe they should just stay with you most of the time until everything's figured out. Right. Because nothing says good mother like voluntarily seeing your kids less so you can live in a 1-bedroom apartment near your totally just a coworker boss. I didn't confront her about David right away. I wanted to gather more info first, so I reached out to her sister Nicole. Nicole and I have always gotten along, maybe a little too well if I'm being honest. Ever since her divorce last year, she's been kind of flirty. Nothing over the top, but enough to notice. She even straight up told me once, if my sister didn't have you first. I just laughed it off and never encouraged it because, marriage. Nicole was shocked about the whole LAT thing, but then she started putting pieces together. Apparently, Kate had been asking her all these hypothetical questions lately like, how long should you wait to date after separation? And is it weird to date someone from work? And my personal favorite, how do you tell the kids you're seeing someone new? Then she told me something that made my blood boil. Kate had been specifically asking about David's schedule, which floor he lived on, and whether he had a girlfriend. Basically everything except his blood type and social security number. She apparently thought she was being subtle. I wanted to throw up. All these years together, and now she comes at me with some trendy new term like it's a damn life hack. Like our marriage is just some experiment she read about in a self-help book. I spent the whole night in the garage pretending to fix things, but actually beating the hell out of my punching bag. My fist was throbbing, and my jaw was clenched so hard my teeth hurt. Every time I thought about her sitting me down like that, so casual, so decided, I saw red. Later, I found out that while I was out there trying to keep myself from losing it, Kate was inside on the phone with Olivia for 2 hours, probably getting more expert advice on how to tear down a marriage in record time. I knew everything was done between us. The trust was completely shattered, but I had to play this on my own terms. It was time to set up my own moves. The next morning, I started looking at apartments myself, but I was playing chess while she was playing checkers. I began checking out places near where Nicole lives, in the complete opposite direction from Pine Ridge. I brought it up to Kate casually over morning coffee. So I started looking at apartments, I mentioned, scrolling through listings on my phone. Kate barely looked up from her coffee. Oh, okay, where? Couple places near Nicole's neighborhood. That got her attention. Her head snapped up so fast she probably gave herself whiplash. Wait, what? She exclaimed. That's the opposite direction from Pine Ridge. I just took a sip of my coffee, staying calm. But that's not fair to the kids, she protested. If we live too far apart, it's going to be hard on them. I set my cup down and just stared at her. Oh, now we're thinking about what's fair to the kids? She blinked like she didn't expect me to push back. The audacity of this woman. She opened her mouth, shut it, then let out this annoyed sigh. That's not what I meant, she said defensively. You're just being difficult on purpose. I leaned back in my chair, let out a short laugh, and shook my head. Oh no, Kate, I'm enjoying this a lot. Her eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't respond, just brushed past her and walked away. That evening, I overheard her on the phone. I wasn't even trying to eavesdrop. Just walked past the bedroom and heard her talking way too casually about something that made my blood boil. Yeah, I think it'll be good for us, she was saying. Gives me a chance to reset, focus on myself. And honestly, I think Tom will come around. Once he sees how much easier things are this way. Excuse me? She thought I would prefer it. Then she laughed. Actually laughed, like this whole thing was just some quirky lifestyle shift, not the complete destruction of our family dynamic. I stood there for a second, fist clenched, just absorbing the fact that she really thought I was just going to roll over and accept this like some clueless passive idiot she could nudge into whatever situation benefited her. That's when I decided it was time to drop my own bomb, and boy did it work better than expected. We were sitting in the kitchen the next morning, going over more LAT details, with Kate being all smug about how maturely we were handling everything. That's when I casually mentioned the Cancun trip. For context, Kate has been obsessed with Cancun since forever, like unhealthy levels of obsession. She follows all these Cancun vacation accounts on Instagram and has a whole Pinterest board dedicated to Cancun beaches. The works, but we never went. Something always came up. The kids were too young, couldn't get time off work, money was tight. You know how it goes. So I'm sitting there, drinking my coffee, and I just casually said, oh, by the way, I need your input on something. Should I try to get a refund for the Cancun tickets or just change the names? The way her head snapped up, pretty sure she gave herself whiplash. What Cancun tickets? She asked, trying and failing to sound casual. That's when I told her about the surprise vacation I'd booked for our upcoming anniversary. 7 days, beachfront hotel, all the works. I'd even arranged for her parents to watch the kids. They didn't know about the LAT situation yet. That was a whole other nightmare waiting to happen. The look on her face was priceless. First excitement, then confusion, then this weird mix of hope and panic, like a kid who just found out they're going to Disney World, but also remembered they're grounded. You planned a Cancun trip for us? She practically whispered. Well, I planned it for us when we were still in us, I replied. But since you want to do this LAT thing, I figured you might want to take someone else instead. The tickets are paid for, non-refundable. Would be a shame to waste them. She started backpedaling so fast I thought she might actually start moonwalking. Maybe we should wait on the LAT thing, she suggested. We could use this trip to reconnect. That's when I dropped the second bomb. Actually, I already called the travel agent, I told her. Had your ticket changed to be transferable. You can take whoever you want. Maybe David would enjoy a beach vacation. The color drained from her face. She went completely ghost white and started stammering about how David was just a coworker, asking why I would even suggest that. I just shrugged and said, well, since you're planning to move into his apartment building, I figured you guys must be close. I got up to get more coffee, like I hadn't just nuked our entire conversation. She followed me around the kitchen, trying to explain that I had it all wrong, that Pine Ridge just happened to be a nice complex, that David living there was just a coincidence. Then she hit me with this. How do you even know David lives there? Have you been checking up on me? I looked her dead in the eyes. Interesting that you're more concerned about how I know where David lives than about the fact you were planning to move in near him without telling me. She didn't say anything. I could see her eyes watering, about to break down. I just stood there feeling nothing but disgust. After the whole Cancun tickets thing, I thought maybe Kate would come clean about everything. Silly me. Instead, she went into full damage control mode. Not the kind where you actually fix things, more like the kind where you try to gaslight everyone into thinking you're the victim. First, she ran to Olivia, because of course she did. They had this 3-hour phone call. I could hear Kate crying through the walls about how I was emotionally manipulating her by checks notes exposing her plan to abandon her kids to live near her boss. The mental gymnastics these two did should qualify them for the Olympics. But here's where it gets interesting. Remember my work buddy Marcus? His sister at Pine Ridge? Well, it turns out David had been doing some shady stuff too. According to office gossip, bless those receptionists and their love for drama, David had been bragging to his work buddies about this hot mom from accounting who was totally into him. Guess who works in accounting? The best part though? David has a girlfriend. A serious girlfriend. Like, they're picking out rings serious. And she has no idea about any of this. I found that out from Marcus's sister, who processed their rental renewal last month. They're living together at Pine Ridge. Now I was sitting on this bomb of information, trying to decide what to do with it. Part of me wanted to blow everything up. Tell David's girlfriend, tell HR, tell everyone. But the smarter part of me, which sounded suspiciously like cousin Megan the lawyer, said to keep collecting evidence and stay calm. Speaking of my lawyer cousin, Megan came through like a champ. She pulled some legal strings and got a copy of Kate's rental application for Pine Ridge. Kate had listed herself as single on the application. Not separated, not married, but single. And she put down David as her emergency contact instead of, her husband or her kid's father. Meanwhile, Kate was still trying to play both sides. 1 minute she's all, let's work on our marriage. And the next she's texting David. Yeah, I saw the notifications pop up on her iPad. She really should change her password from our anniversary date. It was like watching someone try to juggle with no hand-eye coordination. I decided it was time to end this circus. Then there's the Nicole situation. After the Cancun tickets drama, she'd been texting me more often, checking how I was holding up. Nothing inappropriate, just being supportive. But Kate saw one of her texts pop up on my phone while I was making dinner. Hope you're hanging in there, let me know if you need to talk. Kate completely flipped out. The conversation went something like this. Why is my sister texting you? Kate demanded. Because unlike some people, she actually cares about her family, I replied. She's always had a thing for you, Kate accused. I bet you two are loving this. Interesting how you're more worried about your sister texting me than about David's girlfriend finding out about your apartment plans, I shot back. David has nothing to do with this, she insisted. And what girlfriend? She completely lost it, like full-on breakdown mode. She started pacing around the kitchen, running her hands through her hair, muttering about how this wasn't supposed to happen this way. Then she just crumpled. Literally slid down against the kitchen cabinet onto the floor and started sobbing. You're going to leave me for Nicole, aren't you? She choked out between sobs. That's why you're moving near her. You two probably planned this whole thing. I just stood there for a minute, remembering how everything was fine, how she ruined everything. You know what's funny? I finally said, leaning against the counter. You're sitting there crying about me potentially leaving you for your sister, which isn't happening, by the way, while you were literally planning to move into your married boss's apartment complex. The mental gymnastics here are Olympic level. She looked up at me, mascara running down her face. It wasn't like that. I felt stuck, like life was passing me by. And David, he made me feel... Let me stop you right there, I cut her off. Because if the next words out of your mouth are about how your taken boss made you feel special while I was busy providing for our family and raising our kids, I might actually lose it. That set off a fresh round of sobbing. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. Or the girls. Oh God, the girls, what have I done? That's the thing, Kate, I said. You did mean to hurt us. Maybe not consciously, but every step you took. The LAT suggestion, the apartment near David, putting him as your emergency contact, listing yourself as single, those were all choices. Choices you made knowing they would hurt your family. She just sat there crying. And honestly, It didn't make me feel better like I thought it would. It just made me sad. Sad for our kids, sad for what we had, sad that she'd thrown it all away for some fantasy that was never going to work. Then she said something that actually made me laugh out loud. But Olivia said this was normal. She said all marriages go through this, and that LAT would save our relationship. Olivia? You mean the woman who's been divorced 4 times? That Olivia? Yeah, great source of marriage advice there. I'm so stupid, she whispered, more to herself than to me. No, you're not stupid, I sighed heavily. You're selfish. There's a difference. Then she looked up at me with these huge, teary eyes. Can we fix this? Please? I'll do anything. I'll quit my job, cut off Olivia, go to counseling, whatever you want. Just please don't leave me for Nicole. That's when I realized she still didn't get it. She still thought this was about me and Nicole, or her and David, or some other external factor. She couldn't see that she broke something fundamental in our marriage the moment she decided to plan a whole secret life without me or our kids in it. I'm going to stay at Nicole's tonight, I said, while grabbing my keys. Not because anything's happening there, but because I need space to think how we are going to end this. And honestly, looking at you right now just hurts too much. I left her sitting there on the kitchen floor. I could hear her crying as I walked out, but I didn't look back. I got in my truck and just drove. I stayed at Nicole's for 3 days, in the spare room before anyone asks. I needed time to clear my head and figure out next steps. Plus, Cousin Megan the lawyer wanted to get all our ducks in a row before the big family meeting. I decided it was time for everyone to know everything. I set it up at Kate's parents' house, figuring neutral territory would be best. Plus, they deserved to know why their grandkids' lives were about to change. Kate tried to get out of it, saying she was too emotional to handle it. I told her she could either come voluntarily or I'd have Megan start the divorce proceedings without her input. She showed up. Walking in felt surreal. Her mom had made coffee and put out those cookies she always makes for family meetings, like this was just another Sunday visit, not the day their daughter's marriage imploded. Megan brought copies of everything. The Pine Ridge application where Kate listed herself as single, screenshots of text conversations between her and David. Yeah, got those from her iPad, and bank statements showing she'd been moving money to a separate account. Everything. We laid it all out on their dining room table like some twisted timeline of betrayal. Kate's mom started crying when she saw the rental application. Her dad just sat there, getting quieter and quieter as Megan went through everything. The only sound was Kate's occasional sniffling and her mom's muffled sobs. Then we got to the custody plan. I want joint custody, Kate said quietly. Her dad actually laughed, like a harsh, bitter laugh I'd never heard from him before. Joint custody? He questioned. After you tried to move into a 1-bedroom apartment and listed your boss as your emergency contact instead of your children's father? That's rich, honey. Kate started with the waterworks again. I wasn't thinking clearly. Olivia said, "If you mention Olivia one more time," her mom actually shouted. I'd never heard her raise her voice before, ever. Megan stepped in then, all professional and composed. Given the documented evidence of attempted abandonment and the clear prioritization of a potential affair over childcare, we'll be pushing for primary custody with supervised visitation for Kate until she completes counseling and demonstrates stability. The way Kate's face crumpled when Megan said, "supervised visitation," man, that hit hard, like reality finally caught up with her fantasy. Her dad turned to me. The girls, do they know? Not yet, I told him. I wanted to handle this part first. They're with my parents today. Then we had to figure out all the logistics. Megan had drafted a separation agreement. More than fair, really. I'd keep the house. The mortgage is in my name anyway. Kate would move in with her parents temporarily, and we'd have a standard custody arrangement once she completed counseling. Megan even put in a clause about no overnight guests of the opposite sex during visitation. Yeah, that was aimed at David. Kate tried to argue about some points, but her own parents shut her down. Her dad actually said, "You lost the right to negotiate when you tried to abandon your children for a man who's about to be engaged to someone else. Watching your in-laws side with you over their own daughter isn't as satisfying as you'd think. It's just sad." The meeting ended with Kate signing everything through tears. Her mom hugged me goodbye and whispered, "I'm so sorry." Her dad just looked defeated. I got home that night to an empty house, the girls still at my parents'. Everything felt too quiet. I found a note from Kate on the counter, pages and pages of apologies, begging me to reconsider, saying she'd do anything to fix this. At that point, I didn't feel anything. Just empty. It's been 2 months now. The divorce is final. Kate moved back in with her parents after the David situation blew up spectacularly. More on that in a minute. The girls are adjusting better than expected. Turns out kids are pretty smart about figuring out who actually puts them first. So here's what happened with David. Remember his girlfriend? Yeah, she was not happy when she found out about Kate. She actually showed up at Kate's work with printouts of all their texts. Guess I wasn't the only one checking iPads. The whole office got to watch Kate try to explain why she was planning to move into their apartment complex while listing David as her emergency contact. HR got involved, and both Kate and David got fired. Karma's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Olivia also got what was coming to her. Turns out I wasn't the only husband who was tired of her modern relationship advice. 3 other couples from Kate's yoga class came forward about how she'd encourage their wives to try LAT or open marriages. Her ex-husbands had a field day with that one. She's apparently moved to Cancun, ironically enough, to find herself or whatever. Speaking of Cancun, something interesting happened with those tickets. Remember how Kate was so worried about me and Nicole? Well, turns out she wasn't entirely wrong to be worried about it, just wrong about the timing. After everything settled down with the divorce, Nicole and I started hanging out more. At first, it was just family stuff with the girls. They've always loved their aunt, and having her around made the transition easier. Then it was coffee to discuss Kate's latest drama, then dinner to vent about dating horror stories. You know how these things go. One night after putting the girls to bed, Nicole and I were sitting on my back porch talking about those Cancun tickets. She joked about how Kate always thought something was going on between us back then. We laughed about it, and then, well, sometimes the universe has a sick sense of humor. Yeah, we're dating now. No, we didn't plan it. Yes, we know it's messy. But after watching Kate try to blow up our family for some married guy who didn't even want her, it was kind of refreshing to realize I had feelings for someone who already loved my kids and understood what family means. When Kate found out, it was a DEFCON 1-level meltdown. She called her parents screaming about how we'd betrayed her. They just hung up. Guess they remembered how she was ready to abandon her kids for David. She even tried to use it against me in court to get the custody arrangement changed. Megan shut that down real quick, pointing out that dating your ex's sister isn't quite the same as trying to move in with your married boss while listing yourself as single. The custody arrangement is working out great. I've got primary custody, and Kate gets supervised visits thanks to all that documented evidence of her trying to abandon the kids for her married boss. She's in therapy now. Actual therapy, not Olivia's wine and wine sessions. And honestly, it's not my problem anymore. The girls are actually thriving. Turns out having their aunt become their almost stepmom isn't as weird for them as we worried it would be. They just think it's cool that Aunt Nicole is around more. Plus, they've got someone in their life who actually shows up for them, helps with homework, comes to their events, and hasn't once suggested moving away for personal growth. Oh, and that college fund Kate tried to access for her Pine Ridge deposit? Her parents transferred it to an account for the girl's actual college education. They still barely speak to her, but they come over for Sunday dinners with me, Nicole, and the kids every week. It took them a minute to adjust to the new dynamic, but I think they're just happy their grandkids have stability. Life's funny sometimes. A year ago, I thought my world was ending when Kate suggested this LAT nonsense. Now I've got my kids, a great job, business is booming, and somehow ended up with someone who's been there all along, watching me be a good dad and husband while her sister took it all for granted. Kate still tries to manipulate her way back in occasionally. Last week, she left a tearful voicemail about how she's changed and realizes what she lost. I just forwarded it to Megan for the custody file and took Nicole and the girls out for ice cream. The irony of her being so worried about me and Nicole back then, only to end up making it happen herself. Chef's kiss. Sometimes the trash takes itself out, you know. Quick updates for those interested. Yes, David's girlfriend got engaged. To his best friend. No, we didn't send a gift. Update on Olivia. She's apparently writing a book about unconventional relationships. Guess she'll have to add a chapter about how pushing LAT ended up getting your sister your man. I haven't told anyone this part yet, but Nicole and I are using those Cancun tickets next month. We're taking the girls with us, making it a proper family vacation. Something Kate never wanted to do because it wasn't romantic enough. Her loss, our gain. Life has a way of working out, just not always how you expect. The funny thing is, I now realize my ex-wife's terrible life choices led me to the right person who was there all along. And the best part? The kids are actually happier with their aunt as their almost stepmom than they were with their own mother's chaos. Sometimes you don't know what you really have until someone tries to throw it away and ends up losing everything instead.